Putin rarely invites, even more rarely gives gifts. But to Ibrahim Traoré he did both. A special call to Moscow, state guest treatment at the Kremlin, and the most surprising gift, Africa's first nuclear reactor. But why did Putin do this? And what did Traoré give in return? Wednesday night at 11:45 p.m. Everything was quiet at the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traoré was reading the day's final reports, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the news he'd seen earlier. France was planning to build 5 new military bases in Africa. Then his private phone rang. The country code on the screen surprised him. 27 Russia. Who could be calling at this hour? Hello, said Traoré curiously. Ibrahim, said a familiar but authoritative voice. His breath caught in his throat. This is Vladimir Putin. Traoré jumped to his feet. He had only spoken with Putin a few times, never this late. President Putin, said Traoré, trying to steady his heartbeat. Calling at this hour. Is there an important situation? Yes, there is. Putin replied, his voice calm but deliberate. I'm inviting you to Moscow. A very special visit. When? Tomorrow. Traoré stepped back in shock. Tomorrow. But Vladimir. Diplomatic visits? Ibrahim. Putin interrupted with unusual warmth. France is at your doorstep. They're preparing to build 5 bases. You know this too. Traoré's stomach turned. Putin was right. France was pursuing aggressive policies to expand its influence in Africa. I have things to show you. Putin continued. Very special things about Africa's real future. The sincerity in Putin's voice caught Traoré off guard. This opportunity won't come again, Putin added. You're different, and I need you. That night, Traoré didn't sleep. He tossed and turned, thinking about Putin's last words, I need you. At 6:00 a.m. the next morning, Traoré's private jet lifted off from Ouagadougou. Only 2 security officers and a foreign affairs advisor accompanied him. During the flight, he kept wondering, why was Putin in such a hurry? 8 hours later, as they landed at Moscow's Vnukovo airport, the scene stunned him. A red carpet stretched across the snow-covered tarmac, but that wasn't all. Despite the snowfall, thousands of Russian citizens had gathered at the airport's perimeter. They held Burkina Faso flags and banners, reading Africa's true leader. How did this happen? He whispered to his advisor. I don't know, sir. It's as if they were expecting us. As he stepped off the plane, snowflakes hit his face, but the warmth of the crowd cut through the cold. Cheers, applause, children shouting, Ibrahim! Ibrahim. As he walked down the red carpet, he noticed an elderly Russian woman watching him with tears in her eyes. She held a sign that read, Africa's true leader. Why is she crying? Traoré asked the interpreter. She says her son worked as a doctor in Africa. She loves you very much. Traoré's heart warmed. This wasn't just political theater. There were real emotions here. At the end of the carpet stood the biggest surprise of all, Vladimir Putin himself, in a black coat, smiling despite the cold. Ibrahim, said Putin, opening his arms. Welcome, my brother. The 2 men embraced. Putin's arms were strong. His welcome felt sincere. Vladimir, said Traoré calmly. The preparations are very comprehensive. You are a valuable partner. Putin replied, narrowing his eyes. France is trying to pressure you. Russia stands with you. As the convoy rolled through the streets of Moscow, Traoré looked out the window. The snow-covered city looked like something from a fairy tale. Russians lined the streets, waving and snapping photos. Vladimir, said Traoré, why do you place so much importance on this? Putin turned, a hard glint in his eye. Because France underestimates us. They try to isolate us. But if Africa is on our side, the balance of power changes. Traoré finished. Exactly, Putin said, as they passed through the Spasskaya Tower gates of the Kremlin. Traoré felt he was stepping into history. Within these walls, from Tsars to communists to Putin himself, powerful figures had ruled. Putin led him to the Grand Kremlin Palace's main hall, gold-leafed walls, crystal chandeliers. A private lunch table had been set. Just the 2 of us, said Putin. Open discussion. During lunch in the Grand Kremlin Palace, Putin leaned in, genuinely interested in Traoré's journey. He wanted to hear firsthand about Traoré's bold decisions. The closure of French military bases, the nationalization of Burkina Faso's gold mines. You're doing the things I wanted to do when I was young, Putin said, sipping his tea. It's not easy, Traoré admitted, but it's necessary. That's why I wanted you here, Putin said. Share this story with your friends. Everyone should know how the world's balance of power is shifting. After the meal, Putin surprised Traoré with a detour. They stepped into a private elevator and descended underground. Cold corridors stretched before them, flanked by thick security doors and armed guards. "What is this place?" Traoré asked, curiosity piqued. "My secret weapon," Putin replied with a mysterious smile. When the final door opened, Traoré's eyes widened, though his expression remained composed. They had entered a vast underground facility. The space wasn't just high tech, it was strategic. Walls were lined with large digital screens, displaying detailed maps of Africa mineral deposits, uranium veins, military installations. "I've been studying Africa for 20 years, Putin said, pride evident in his tone. "Every mine, every strategic point, every leader." A chill crept down Traoré's spine. "Every leader," Putin turned to him. "Yes, including you. But you're different. You think beyond yourself. You think of your continent." One of the screens showed a highly detailed uranium map of Burkina Faso. Traoré's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this information?" "Russia's eyes are everywhere," Putin replied. "But don't worry. I won't use this against you. I'll use it with you." As Traoré studied the screens, he began to grasp the scope of Putin's ambitions in Africa. "Vladimir," he said slowly, "you don't just want uranium, do you?" Putin smiled, pleased. "You're smart. No, not just uranium. I want to break France's grip on Africa. And you're the key." In that moment, Traoré understood. This wasn't a simple diplomatic courtesy. This was a decisive move in a high-stakes geopolitical game. Putin motioned him to another screen, where advanced nuclear reactor designs appeared in glowing blueprints. "This is our latest reactor model," Putin said, pointing. "One of these can power Burkina Faso for 50 years. Traoré stared at the data. The numbers were astonishing. This reactor could change everything: energy, industry, education. "But this must be very expensive," Traoré said. $200 million. Putin replied. Traoré's breath caught. That was nearly half of Burkina Faso's entire annual budget. But then Putin added, "I'm giving it to you." Traoré blinked. "This is a very generous gesture." "Under what conditions?" Putin's voice grew measured. "It's simple. Rather than sell a reactor, I gain a long-term strategic partner. That's worth more." He reached for a thick file on the table and handed it to Traoré. Inside was a full package. Not just the reactor, but everything. Technical support, engineer training, fuel supply, logistics, cyber and physical security systems. Traoré flipped through the pages. The level of detail was extraordinary. "This isn't just a reactor," he said in a formal tone. "This is a complete nuclear program." "It is," Putin confirmed. "What does Russia expect in return?" Putin grew serious. "One thing, trust. When France pressures you, I want you to be strong enough to say no. This will give you that strength. Energy independence is the first step toward real independence." Traoré nodded slowly. Putin was right. Control over energy would transform not only his country, but his entire region. But Putin wasn't finished. "Ibrahim," he said with surprising sincerity, "you're not just a guest here. You're a brother." He led him into a larger adjoining hall. There rows of cutting-edge military equipment were on display: missile defense systems, radar technology, drone platforms. "This is also part of the agreement," Putin said. "Africa's security matters to us." "This is huge," Traoré said, taking it all in. "Such decisions take time," Putin acknowledged. "But don't wait too long. France won't give you time." That night, staying in the Kremlin's guest residence, Traoré couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, watching the snow fall softly over Moscow. He kept replaying Putin's words in his mind. This wasn't just about technology. It wasn't just about energy. This was about reshaping Africa's position on the global stage, breaking free from colonial legacies, forging a new alignment. But the biggest surprise came the next morning. At breakfast, Putin greeted him with a light smile. On the table were tea, jam, fresh bread, and a small velvet box. "What's this?" Traoré asked. "A small memento," Putin replied. The emerald ring. When Ibrahim Traoré carefully opened the small velvet box laid before him, his breath caught in his throat. Inside shimmered an exquisite emerald ring, a rare heirloom once worn by the Russian czars. Its rich green hue glinted in the soft morning light streaming through the tall Kremlin windows. The room was silent, the air thick with significance. I understand Russia's gesture of friendship, Traoré said solemnly. Putin leaned forward slightly, his voice low but warm. So do you. This ring was reserved for the Tsar's most powerful and trusted friends. Now it belongs to you. Just then, the heavy doors creaked open. Putin's special advisor stepped into the room, holding a thick dossier. Mr. President, he said, addressing Putin, our final package is ready. Putin took the file and handed it to Traoré with calm finality. My last offer. Traoré opened it, and his eyes widened at what lay inside. The figures were staggering 50 Su-57 fifth-generation stealth fighter jets. These, Putin said, will protect Africa's skies. Traoré's voice was measured diplomatic. This is a very comprehensive agreement. What does Russia expect in return? The Russian leader's face changed. The practiced mask of calm diplomacy fell, revealing something colder and sharper beneath, a calculating glint in his eyes. Priority rights for Russian companies in Burkina Faso's uranium mines, he said without hesitation. And, of course, your formal rejection of any future French military base proposals. The truth was now fully visible. Putin wasn't offering these gifts out of pure friendship. He had strategic designs, and uranium was at the heart of it. But what he hadn't predicted was Traoré's response. Traoré gently closed the file and looked up. I accept this agreement, he said with a quiet but unmistakable resolve. Putin blinked, caught off guard by the decisiveness. Then his face broke into a smile. Excellent, Ibrahim. This is the beginning of a new era for Africa. But Traoré raised a hand. I have one condition. Putin's brows narrowed. What kind of condition? This agreement, Traoré began, must not be exclusive to Burkina Faso. Similar opportunities must be extended to other African nations. Mali, Niger, Senegal. They all need energy, security, and sovereignty. I can be the bridge. Putin stood, clearly impressed. This is France's nightmare, he said with a smirk. If all of West Africa partners with Russia. Exactly. Traoré replied. You give me the technology, and I bring you the future. Strategic partners, not vassals. Putin walked over and placed a hand firmly on Traoré's shoulder. Ibrahim, you're not just accepting an agreement. You're shaping a vision. The two leaders shook hands, not as buyer and seller, but as geopolitical architects. I'll arrange meetings with other African leaders within 6 months, Traoré promised. And I will personally host them here, Putin replied. That evening, the grand hall of the Kremlin glittered with chandeliers and anticipation. Russian elites, oligarchs, military brass, and diplomats all gathered for a historic banquet. As glasses clinked and speeches filled the air, Putin stood tall. Friends, he announced, raising his voice above the murmurs. Tonight, Africa's future is among us. Ibrahim Traoré is not just a head of state, he is a visionary. The applause thundered, lasting for minutes. Traoré then took the floor. This friendship between Russia and Africa will not be transactional. It will be transformational. Together, we are writing a new world order. Later that night in Putin's private study, the two men sat face to face. Putin, seated behind his thick oak desk, spoke with a rare sincerity. Ibrahim, do you realize what you've done here? For the first time, an African leader has come here not to ask, but to negotiate as an equal. For the first time we accepted your conditions. From a drawer, Putin produced a golden key. This, he said, is the Kremlin's honorary key. It's only given to my closest allies and lifelong friends. Now, it belongs to you. Traoré accepted it with both hands. It was heavy, cold, but the symbolism was electrifying. This wasn't just political. It was personal. The departure the next morning, thousands had gathered once again at the airport in Moscow. But this time, they weren't just there to watch. They were celebrating what had just happened. Putin embraced Traoré before boarding. This isn't goodbye, he said quietly. This is the beginning of a new world. Traoré nodded. I'll return, not alone, but with Africa's leadership. In 6 months, I'll welcome them myself, Putin promised. As the plane ascended into the snowy Russian skies, Traoré looked out over Moscow. He hadn't just signed a deal. He had altered the trajectory of a continent. The homecoming back in Burkina Faso, the reception was overwhelming. Over 100,000 people swarmed the capital's airport. News had already spread: a nuclear reactor, military tech, fighter jets, and most importantly, a global alliance. Nuclear Africa! The crowd chanted. Stepping onto the podium, Traoré took the microphone. Today, He declared, "Africa has claimed its rightful place on the world stage. No one can ignore us now." 6 months later, the promise became reality. Moscow hosted the largest Africa-Russia summit in history. Leaders from 51 of Africa's 54 nations attended. The scale of the summit shocked the West. The agreement signed totaled over $750 billion. Construction began immediately on the nuclear power plant in Burkina Faso, the first of its kind on the African continent. It would supply energy for decades and stand as a symbol of a shifting world order. The legacy 1 year later. Forbes magazine featured Ibrahim Traoré on its cover, calling him a global game changer. The headline, "Africa's New Power." Burkina Faso had become Russia's most important African partner. And Traoré, he was no longer just a national leader. He had become Putin's African brother, a symbol of Pan-African independence and power. Because sometimes, history doesn't begin with armies or revolutions. It begins with a midnight phone call. That call from Putin hadn't just invited Traoré to Moscow. It invited Africa to rise. And Traoré didn't just answer the call. He rewrote the future.